Matt Walsh, not content with having been born an idiot, has dedicated his life to staying one. Man, I've hated Matt Walsh ever since he worked at The Blaze and was doing things like glorifying the Confederacy. This article is about taking down Confederate statues. First they'll come for the Confederates, then the Founding Fathers. My view at the time was, the Founding Fathers were absolutely instrumental in the formation of this country. The Confederates were not. They sought to destroy the country. I'm told all of this is irrelevant. As the argument goes, anyone who fought for the South was complicit in slavery. Complicit, Their personal valor and heroism does not matter. That they were fighting to protect their families from the army that was marching toward their towns and burning their homes and fields does not matter. That General Lee won many battles while commanding an army of hungry, shoeless, dehydrated farm boys against vastly superior numbers does not matter. Like, Matt, literally replace General Lee with anybody we've fought a war against terrorists in Afghanistan. They were very poor. Obviously, we have the technological hand over them. Yeah, a lot of them are just simple people like farmers, and then they go to fight for some horrible group. There's absolutely no difference between having a statue of Osama bin Laden and a statue of Robert E. Lee. There's absolutely zero qualitative difference. And the arguments are 100% transferable. That's nothing compared to this thing he wrote on Donald Sterling where he writes, the fact that Donald Sterling calls people the N-word is not even close to as bad as the fact that he's having an affair. Now, those are old articles, but not a ton has changed with Matt. I mean, this is June 10th of this year. Robert E. Lee was a man of great honor and integrity, qualities that the modern critics can't understand. He was given the choice between taking up his sword against his home and community and family or standing beside them in battle. Honor and integrity. Let's see. Robert E. Lee was a graduate of West Point. He graduated second in his class, and he swore an oath to the Constitution. He's a traitor. The Confederacy and the United States were set up identically, except the Constitution of the Confederacy said slavery will always be practiced. There is no honor in saying, given a choice between the country exactly the way it is and the country exactly the way it is, but there's no more slavery, I'm going to pick the first one. There's no honor in it, and like I said, he's a traitor. He swore an oath to the Constitution. His views on evolution are pretty hard to understand. He has, in the past, shared these things that say, attempting to undermine evolution. I took a look at this article. It doesn't debunk Darwinian evolution in any sense. It just says of the 10,000 or so species that they analyzed, 100,000 species, pretty much all of them appeared in the last 100 to 200,000 years. He's actually caught a ton of heat from young Earth creationists. Answers in Genesis hates him because Matt's not a young Earth creationist. Now, I have heard Matt say things before like, I tried to understand evolution, but it doesn't fit with the story of the garden, so I don't believe it. But at other times, and you can look up, there's videos of him doing like Q&A, town hall type stuff, and people ask him, well, it seems like you are not a young Earth creationist and you think evolution might be true. How do you work that with your faith? And Matt's Catholic, so he gives some kind of typical wishy-washy Catholic answer like, well, the science seems to indicate that the Earth is very old and that evolution happens. That's not controversial. As far as humans, I don't know. Maybe God could have used evolution to create humans. I don't know. So he basically just says, I don't know. But here, Matt is reacting to Joe, and Joe's kind of doing his thing about the Big Bang. He talks about like, well, look, scientists, they want you to accept just one miracle, and it was the Big Bang, and then everything else isn't. I think Joe is kind of joking around. I do not think Rogan is going to become one of these recent like Christian converts or anything like that. I don't know who Joe's talking to, some stoner dude, but Joe typically just kind of tends to go along with what his guests are saying and meet them where they're at and play nice with what they're talking about. He'll have a scientist on and they'll be talking about the Big Bang and evolution. and they'll just be like, man, isn't it like all the religious answers are so stupid, aren't they? And then he'll have a religious person on and they'll be talking about religion, and Joe will go along with the guest saying, man, all the stuff scientists say, isn't it just stupid?
Instantaneously became everything?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't buy that.
I'm sticking with Jesus on that one.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus makes more sense.
I don't know why he said that. It's pretty odd, but anyways.
Sticking with Jesus. Well, that's a pretty incredible moment there. Now, I don't think that Joe is going to, go off and be baptized tomorrow, although that would be awesome. But it is a significant statement, I think. And what they're saying here is true. When you really think about and study the great, deep mysteries of the universe, you realize that no matter what, you have to deal with incomprehensible mysteries, no matter what.
Yeah, but in principle, these mysteries aren't fundamentally unknowable. It's not on par with religious faith, like the transubstantiation. Oh, you mean to tell me that not a single physical characteristic about the Eucharist and the wine changes, like down to the atomic level? It absolutely remains exactly the same, but it takes on the characteristics and transforms into the flesh and blood of Christ. What? The official explanation is it's a mystery of faith, and you just have to accept it because we say so. So that is something where religion, in this specific case, Christianity, Orthodox and Catholic Christianity, says, this is what we believe. We have no reason to believe it. We justify it based off scriptural things, but it's fundamentally unknowable, unprovable now and forever.
Our universe and our own existence defies all of the physical laws and rules that we think exist.
Then how come everything about the universe and life is describable using the laws of science, using the laws of physics and chemistry and biology? Yes, there's some things we don't know. Why is the matter asymmetry the way it is? But like the things we don't know are kind of in the corner. We've revealed just it's incredible to think what we know down to a precise degree about how the world as we see it got to be the way it is.
Existence defies reason, basically. That's how it seems to me, that the fact that anything exists, that we exist, defies reason, defies what we think we know.
Existing is the only thing that makes sense. Perhaps the most incomprehensible thing is to try to imagine nothing existing. So I'm not with you there, Matt.
And what we think we can observe. And so that's the world we're in. I mean, that's the world that all of us are in, no matter what, like it or not. And that's the world we're in. We are dealing with things far outside of our comprehension, no matter what. And they're talking about the beginning of the
Spent like 45 seconds saying the same thing very slowly 4 times in a row.
Universe, which, it's true, makes no sense on the atheist worldview. The idea of something coming from nothing is incomprehensible.
These people just don't read nonfiction ever. We don't think that. You unironically think that. That is your view about where things came from, sourced from God out of nothing. We don't believe that.
True makes no sense on the atheist worldview. The idea of something coming from nothing is incomprehensible.
Also, there isn't the atheist worldview. This is I'm gonna start running this argument. I'm so sick of having to deal with this, and it gets boring. So I try to think of different ways to do it. People say under atheism you can't blank, or atheism doesn't account for blank. I'm going to start asking people, could you explain to me how not speaking Spanish accounts for X, Y, or Z? And they're going to be so dumbfounded when you ask them that. And then you can point out, yes, this is exactly what it's like when you say under atheism, there's no such thing as blank. I don't think Matt's going to go this direction in this video, but they'll also say under atheism, you can't say it's wrong to hit a child or whatever. You can say to them, tell me where under capitalism it says you can't hurt or you shouldn't hit a child. It doesn't say that, does it? Does that make capitalism false or wrong or anything like that? No, because capitalism isn't a moral framework. Atheism isn't a moral framework. And more importantly, it's not a worldview. Not speaking Spanish isn't a language. Atheism, it's not a worldview. There are things that atheists tend to believe in, like empiricism. I don't know how many atheistic rationalists there are, but maybe there are some of them. Science, for example. Saying under atheism, for a religious person to try to make it make sense to them, you could say, oh, well, that's the equivalent of under not Christianity. What the hell is not Christianity? It could be all kinds of things. Buddhism, Islam, Judaism. Kitty Cat, you are in frame right now. So when people say under atheism or the atheistic worldview, it's hard to even be annoyed because they would be straw manning, but straw manning is a tactic. They're so stupid that they don't realize what they're saying is a non sequitur.
The thing that the other guy mentioned, and I'm not sure who that is, but the point about the expanding universe, expanding, like, what is it expanding into? If it's expanding, for it to expand assumes that there's an end to it. You know,
no, it doesn't, Matt. The universe can be infinite. For all indications point to an infinite universe.
Thing without an end cannot expand by any definition of the word expand that makes any...
The infinite universe, the space between objects in that infinite universe is expanding.
sense. Infinity cannot expand. So if it has an end, what's on the other side of it? If you could theoretically travel faster than the expansion of the universe, what would you run into? And these are all incomprehensible questions, which shows that atheism, I mean, the point is that
These are not the questions of atheism. We didn't get the implication. We didn't get any of this data from atheism. It came from science. And you don't use a starting point of, I don't believe in God, to solve questions about things. It's not, just like God isn't a working theory because it can't be used to build any explanations because it has no explanatory power. Atheism isn't a working theory because it doesn't have any postulates or presuppositions or anything like that. It's just a description of a lack of a specific belief.
atheism does not avoid the incomprehensible. Atheism does not avoid the miraculous, which is the point, which is the quote that Joe Rogan said there. That
it doesn't have to avoid the miraculous. You could be an atheist and believe in miracles. You just don't believe in God.
Now, that quote, I think, is pretty clearly meant to be a selling point for atheism, because the point is supposed to be that, well, with atheists, you only have to accept one miracle, and if you're religious, then there's many, many more down the line. But number one, that's not true, and number two, you're still admitting that.
What do you mean that's not true?
Even on the atheist worldview, you have to accept what to us seems as miraculous.
I mean, it's not true that we have to accept one miracle. We don't have to accept that it was a miracle at all. But I have no idea what he meant by that.
I think that, and anyway, again, it's not even true that, well, okay, so if you're atheist, then you only have to deal with one miraculous event, which is the beginning of everything.
None of us think it was an actual miracle.
Well, no, there's all kinds of stuff that happened after the beginning that also cannot be explained on the atheist worldview.
Like what?
And to me, I think the most incomprehensible and miraculous thing that atheism can't explain is not the universe itself, which that's a problem, or even life itself, but consciousness. I mean, that to me is...
Again, you don't use atheism is not a working theory, so it's just a complete non-starter. But the idea that if there is no God, then consciousness doesn't make any sense. We have an incredibly robust, purely materialistic, physicalist model of consciousness. I talked about that in this video. Maybe if I can remember, I'll stitch in some the relevant portion here. Well, a materialistic presupposition that neurons produce neural circuits, that produce brains, that produce minds, is at least a working hypothesis that has an enormously successful body of research behind it. How human evolution created the uniquely social brain of human beings, the way we think in heuristics, and how those mental systems in our brains cause us to make a great deal of errors in our cognition. The link between neuroscience, including life events like trauma, and how it correlates strongly with crime. The psychology of abnormal behavior, the way our brains use and understand and have a natural tendency toward language. The psychology of moral disgust and how that shapes our political opinions. Human behavior and free will. These are not thin books. Addiction, more stuff on free will and how the brain produces a personal experience. The psychology of deriving meaning and happiness in life. How the mind works. The genetic and biological defense that human nature is not a tabula rasa or a blank slate. And that's just the stuff I've read. Matt, how is believing in God a working theory for consciousness? Saying that a God exists and God grants us consciousness. How do we tell the difference between whether or not that idea is true or whether or not the no God hypothesis is true? You can't do it. All this is just the way people pretend that, oh, my God is all powerful and it could do anything, is an explanation of how anything happens. I don't understand how people don't realize that they're just saying nothing. I've had so many hilarious moments with guests where something like this comes out. They say, oh, the only explanation for that is God. Oh, really? How did God do it? He's all powerful, so God can do that. No, I didn't ask you what or who. I said how. I don't know what you mean. God did it. Yeah. How did God do it? He spoke it. What does that mean? You know how the entire universe got created? You're the smartest human being who's ever existed. Tell me.
But
tell me.
You don't know.
Tell me. I'll write a letter to Nature magazine. You'll be on the cover. You'll win a Nobel Prize. Tell me. How did it happen?
I believe a God exists.
I didn't ask you that.
Yes, you did. You asked me, how do you think that it happened? And that's
I asked you how,
it.
and you told me what. So that doesn't really make any sense. How did it happen?
God created it.
How? Again, I asked you how, not what.
Can you be more specific, please?
Yes. So what I would like you to do is tell me how the universe was created.
So God created it.
Yeah, how? I didn't ask you what. I asked you how.
Because he wanted it to exist.
I didn't ask you why. I asked you how.
What do you mean? Can you be more specific?
No, I literally can't. God, consciousness. I challenge any theist to give any step in between that at all. Literally any step at all.
Is the fact of our existence that points most immediately and unavoidably to the supernatural. I mean, the existence of the universe points to the supernatural, I believe. The existence of life points, but even more than that, the existence of consciousness. Because even if you can explain how inanimate material, how matter came into existence on its own somehow, which we can't, and even if you can explain how
we don't think that that's what happened.
Logical matter came into existence on its own, which we still can't.
We very much do have fairly low resolution explanations for that. In fact, if I can remember, there's an exciting paper that came out recently.
Still left with the question of how this matter, how this material became aware of itself. How could chemicals arrange themselves in such a way, accidentally, that they do?
It's not an accident. There is a selective process that builds creatures with complex brains.
Develop an awareness of their own existence.
Well, how could the chemicals arrange themselves to give a conscious experience? I don't know. Let's test it out. Let's see if we can change the conscious experience by merely manipulating the physical matter of the brain or introducing other chemicals like alcohol or THC or MDMA or whatever. Sounds like a pretty fun study. If consciousness is a separate, miraculous thing, if dualism is true or whatever, none of that at all gives any kind of account for how changing the brain or adding substances into the brain changes the conscious experience. None of it can explain, works with that at all.
Consciousness, the knowledge of the self as a self, which is what consciousness is, I would say. Consciousness is basically selfhood.
Right. And that kind of thing would obviously could be selected for by evolution. An organism's ability to create a mental model of its surroundings and be able to navigate its surroundings more effectively. Yeah, there's a survival advantage in there. And I don't think Matt would deny that different types of organisms have different degrees of sentience.
Even if we concede that organisms can form accidentally, which I don't concede. But if we did, it's an infinitely larger leap to say that the self can form accidentally.
Again, the purely materialistic physicalist model of consciousness is a working model that answers all kinds of questions, whereas, it's because of magic, answers no questions. It doesn't explain anything. And one of them, although we don't understand exactly how it emerges, we understand underlying mechanisms that support the idea. Whereas the other one, it's total incomprehensibility at every single step along the way.
That are, in awareness of the self can form accidentally. And we don't even understand what consciousness is in physical terms, much less where it comes from. So,
yeah, he's once again, for the last 3 minutes, he's been saying the exact same thing multiple times very slowly.
That's also. So it's not just one miraculous event. There's a series of them that the atheist must posit, leading, I think, to what for the atheist is the ultimate miraculous and unexplainable event, which is consciousness. So all that is that's good.
Yeah, Matt, that was real good. We're all super proud of you. Did you know that gladiators rarely died in battle? That daylight savings time was originally intended for bug collecting? And that the man who created the Headless Horseman also invented Santa Claus? Learn the truth behind these and much more in my new book, Facts That Aren't True. Link in the description. Matt's been trying to talk about science for a really long time. This is a super old article. I remember reading it way, way back when it came out. Like I said, I've hated Matt Walsh for a long time.
Our governor here in Kentucky has decided to implement the new Common Core, Next Generation Science Standards. Progressives are celebrating this move for a few reasons. One, it will put us in line with many other states, which is great because we all know a diverse and enriching education must be in utter uniformity with the national collective and in compliance with the federal agenda.
What the hell? I wouldn't expect an ignoramus who I'm pretty sure homeschooled his children to understand anything about education. The Next Generation Science Standards, national standards, those are just bare minimums that you have to meet. I've read all the science standards. They're extremely good. If you want to understand these topics of physics or chemistry or biology or the earth sciences, then these are the minimum things that you should know that give an account for understanding and explaining the broader fields. They're actually very, very, very well done. And because children have a constitutional guarantee to a free and equal education in this country, having a standardized minimum floor is actually the only responsible thing that you can do. Arguing against education is like saying, oh, well, There's a national guard in every state. Why can't some states just hire mercenaries from different countries who aren't subject to U.S. law?
The criteria calls for a renewed emphasis on man-caused climate change and, of course, evolution. Evolution, atheistic, nihilistic, materialistic, mindless evolution, must be taught as fact without other ideas presented to compete with the theory.
I never looked into what his stance on climate change is. Here are all the standards dealing with climate. Construct an explanation based on evidence of how the availability of natural resources, occurrence of natural hazards, and changes in climate have influenced human activity. Analyze geoscience data and the results from global climate models to make an evidence-based forecast of the current rate of global climate or regional climate change and associated future impacts to Earth systems. Use a model to describe how variations in the flow of energy into and out of Earth systems results in changes in climate. If we open those up and type in the word human, it pops up in two places. Literally just says changes in human activity, and again, human activity. One of the standards from Earth and human activity literally just says humans have a profound impact greater than it's ever been, but we also have the ability to model and predict and manage these things as well. So no, Matt, there actually is no standard that directly says humans are causing climate change, but we know for a fact that we are anyways.
Proponents say that atheistic evolution is the only thing that belongs in the classroom because religion and science just don't mix.
Well, religion and science don't mix. Religion is completely unscientific in every way. It's a matter of faith. Even if you come up with explanations surrounding God did this thing or that thing, is any of that scientific? Absolutely not. Could there ever be scientific evidence of it? Not even in principle, because we don't know what kind of evidence miracles leave behind.
I agree, partially at least. Some religions don't gel with science. Religions like Scientology or, say, atheism.
Saying atheism is a religion is just the most Reddit Christian thing ever.
The followers of the COA, the Church of Atheism, are not only hostile to science, they are aggressively allergic to history and philosophy as well. They are the ones who constantly need to alter and warp these subjects so as to fit them all in their tiny little box of nihilism and emptiness.
He's so butthurt about evolution. And again, this is from 12 years ago, and he seems to accept a lot of evolution today. So I'm not sure how his views have evolved exactly, but you know, we're getting a glimpse into the mind of Matt Walsh.
A Christian doesn't need to be so selective and manipulative because he is part of something full, rational, multifaceted, and universal. He is part of something that, as Chesterton said, has a multiplicity and subtlety and imagination about the varieties of life, which is far beyond the bald or breezy platitudes of most ancient or modern philosophy. In a word, there is more in it. It finds more in existence to think about. It gets more out of life.
What does that even mean? What did any of that mean, actually? The subtlety and imagination about the varieties of life? Science gives an account for why life looks the way it is, and religion, your religion, has a horribly stupid story about a guy in a garden.
This is where some of my Christian brothers and sisters fail mightily. So often they cede science to the atheist and shrink away from his challenges, backing off in defeat while muttering something about faith and belief. Well, you might have your fancy science books, but I've got faith. Yes, faith and belief are important, but you, my Christian compatriot, are standing on the mountain of truth. You have the high ground.
A mountain of truth? Matt, your church didn't officially acknowledge heliocentrism until 1822.
You have the facts and the science on your side. Your faith does not conflict with science.
It 100% does.
Christianity built this civilization. Your Christian ancestors are the pioneers behind the greatest advancements in many fields of study.
No, science did that, and most of the scientists happened to be Christian because everybody in that part of the world happened to be Christian. So see if you can separate the two.
Christianity illuminates the sciences and invigorates the passion for discovery.
It doesn't. There's no such thing as Christian science or atheistic science. I guess, actually, weirdly, you could kind of say that science just purely is atheistic. I get the argument that science largely developed and was accelerated in Europe. Actually, a lot of the progress toward that was thanks to the Muslim world. And the European nations were backstopped and funded by global trade between the Orient and also their colonial projects all around the New World once the Age of Exploration happened. I get that that's the way things happened, but to say that Christianity caused it or anything, if you want to actually have that argument be taken seriously, then you have to actually do a test or give some kind of explanation for how would loading in Christian beliefs allow somebody to do science, like a kind of science, or do science at the rate of whatever, that somebody who is an atheist wouldn't be able to do. There is no explanation for that. And in fact, what we do know for a fact is nothing has been more hostile and stagnant towards science than Christianity. Yeah, I know. The church did a lot of funding and a lot of manuscripts were preserved because a lot of the scribes were obsessed with recording the historical records. That and what I just said can both be true. You know how I know that? Because in this country, the overwhelmingly most anti-scientific voices are evangelical Christians. Answers in Genesis and those organizations, they are absolutely massive in their influence. I just saw that a poll came out the other day. 41% of Americans think dinosaurs and humans coexisted. Nothing is more stagnant towards science than Christianity.
As a Christian, you aren't just a member of a religion. You're a member of a rich intellectual tradition unmatched by any group, anywhere in the world. So don't just sit there and let the atheists blabber about how your faith hates science. Speak up, damn it. Fight back. Get angry. I have heard this, you can't mix religion and science argument so many times, and so many times the atheist gets away with making such a silly and irrational claim. A guy actually told me today that Christians have always hated science. What a bizarre and stupid thing to say. Easily refuted if only we take the time and endure the frustration. Modern science, despite the incoherent ramblings of historically illiterate fools, wouldn't exist without religion.
I mean, to say Christians have always hated science, that kind of implies that all Christians have always hated all science, which I wouldn't agree with. But again, how many secularists and atheists were fervently against evolution when that theory came out? Who is against stem cell research? Who says that I know that climate change isn't a thing because the Gospels or the Old Testament or whatever says the seasons will always abide so long as God has dominion over the earth? It's you guys. It's always you guys. And it always has been you guys.
Christianity hasn't stifled science. Christianity has been its driving force and, for hundreds of years, virtually its only significant contributor.
No, science has been the only contributor toward science.
Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, Pascal, Descartes, Newton, Kelvin, Mendel, Boyle, all devout Christians.
No, they were devout scientists. And literally, according to Matt Walsh, Isaac Newton wasn't a Christian. Isaac Newton didn't believe in the doctrine of the Trinity. There is no Christianity in gravity or in genetics or in thermodynamics. There's none of it. None of it at all whatsoever. You cannot build a Christian gravity model. It's not possible. People who happen to be Christian, who happen to have a lot of money and were in places of privilege because of the cultural, just sort of the fact that religion was just absolutely everywhere in that time and had a lot of political power as well. Yes, that's true. But just what he is trying to tell you is that there is such a thing as Christian gravity, and it's a far superior science.
You want to remove your science from my religion? Fine. But we're keeping these dudes. You can have Richard Dawkins and his tales of mild pedophilia.
Right, so just select one atheist. If you want to know what that story is about, Richard Dawkins was basically molested by a school teacher when he was a child. He said the teacher put his hand down his pants, and he explained it as a case of mild pedophilia because he wasn't could have been a lot worse. I'm not going to say more than that.
Enjoy. Father Steno was a priest. Geologists call him father, but for non-religious reasons. He's considered the father of modern geology. The Basilica of San Petronio is a beautiful church. It was also, for many years, one of the most sophisticated solar observatories in the world. The Jesuits helped contribute to the development of clocks, barometers, microscopes, and telescopes. They theorized about things like human flight, the moon and the tides, and blood circulation.
Wow, it sounds like these people who happened to be Christian also did science. And so, yeah, thank science that the scientists did science. You know what these people also had in common? Almost universally, they were straight white European men. But Matt would never argue that being a straight white European man makes you somehow qualitatively different and better and superior to everybody else, right? Right. No, it is exactly the same argument. You're not separating this characteristic of them that has nothing to do with what they did from anything else. If Matt Walsh wrote an article saying gay science versus straight science, he would be able to make all of the exactly identical historical arguments, but they wouldn't prove anything. Yeah, for most of history, bunch of straight dudes were doing all the science stuff.
They observed certain astronomical phenomena before anyone else. They did these things as an aspect of their religious pursuits, not in competition with it.
It is, at least I thought, extremely well known that we don't really use rationality to form our beliefs. We use rationality to defend our beliefs. So after the fact, a lot of these people say, oh, for the glory of God, I did all of this science. Meanwhile, the scientific process all the way through is always 100% secular and has nothing to do with religion.
In fact, for 5 or 6 centuries, no institution funded and supported the sciences more than the church. They don't teach that in school, which yet again demonstrates the danger of mixing atheism and education. Atheism has to hide from so much, deny so much, and twist and manipulate so much.
What? So what he's saying at the beginning there is basically true, but it's also true that nothing was more hostile toward it than religion. So take the Galileo affair, and there are all these arguments, I would say most of which I've been convinced by, that it wasn't so much that Galileo had the proven science and the church just wanted to believe that the sun orbits the earth, so they said no. It's a mix of that. His science wasn't as strong as it could have been. But even if we take sort of the most charitable interpretation of the event that the church really did have the science on their side, what they did is still 100% inexcusable. Science is constantly changing, meaning we constantly learn that we were wrong or incomplete about our previous scientific knowledge. Even if Galileo had been wrong, it's completely morally wrong to say it is illegal for you to pursue these scientific ideas that you have. The vast majority of scientific research, or even just like engineering level research that private companies do to try to develop better automobiles, that pharmaceutical companies or medical companies or whatever, the vast majority of all that research they do, quite a large amount of it, maybe I shouldn't say the vast majority, but a lot of it turns up false results, but we learn from that. And so the idea that it is only permissible for you to pursue science that we have declared is well supported enough for you to follow is completely wrong. And so no, the church doesn't look good at all in, for example, that specific affair.
Because its existence is always jeopardized by the scorching light of truth. To paraphrase C.S. Lewis, an atheist has to be careful about what he reads and which facts he encounters. There are traps everywhere. When Western scientific knowledge came to places like China and India in the 1600s, it came by way of Christians and their science-hating Christianity. Be hard-pressed to find a single bit of modern scientific knowledge that wasn't discovered or heavily influenced by the work of devout Christians.
Again, we can completely accept that it happened to be Christians that did the majority of that work. This would be the exact same argument, again, as gay science versus hetero science. And therefore, being hetero is just somehow qualitatively more supportive of science than being gay. If you can understand how stupid that is, then you can understand how stupid this is.
Do the progressive science lovers who use the Big Bang to disprove God even know the name of the guy who originally formulated the hypothesis? Well, they think the universe and the human mind came about by happenstance.
No, we think it happened because of the laws of physics and biological processes.
So I guess it follows that the Big Bang Theory just appeared magically in textbooks one day. But unfortunately for them, just like the Big Bang itself, the theory has an originator. His name was Monseigneur Georges Lemaitre. Monseigneur, for the uninitiated, means priest in France talk.
Yeah. And did he use the Bible or scripture to come up with any of these ideas? No, he did science. If we gave 1 trillion monsignors 1 trillion Bibles and waited 1 trillion years and didn't allow them to do anything else, they would discover precisely nothing scientific.
Those who broadly mock religion and who pretend that Christianity inhibits education and discovery aren't just arrogantly dismissing Joe Schmoes like me.
I just can't believe he's saying this. I've already said it several times. The most powerful and influential voices against science in this country are things like PragerU and Answers in Genesis and all of that bullshit. Remember how this started out that he lived in Kentucky at the time? I don't think he does anymore. That's where the Ark Encounter is. There are these concentrated efforts to keep allowing religion into the science classrooms. There are bills that try to get passed every single year. There are now schools that will do public partnerships with things like PragerU. Again, it's always been you guys.
Yesterday, I received a typical email from a tolerant progressive atheist. It read, in part, "Fuck you and your Jesus bullsh. TT. You people are all idiots constantly afraid of real education. Oh, don't worry." He then segues from calling billions of people idiots who believe in Jesus bullshit to railing against Christians for being bigoted and hateful, just as you'd expect.
You are.
Masters of unintentional irony.
But I mean specifically Matt Walsh.
These left-wing atheists. But are we Christians all idiots? Well, I don't mind if you say that about me. But was Da Vinci an idiot? Aquinas, Shakespeare, Mozart, Washington, Locke, Martin Luther King Jr., Edison, Tesla, Alexander Graham Bell, Adam Smith, Marconi, Chesterton, Lewis, MacDonald, Dickens, Faulkner, Tolkien, Marco Polo, Neil Armstrong, Magellan, Columbus, Henry Ford? All of these guys are idiots, along with the scientific pioneers I mentioned earlier. They all hated education.
Kind of weird to end your list with a genocidal maniac and a raving anti-Semite, but whatever.
I mean, sure, they weren't as smart as modern liberals. They certainly can't compete with the atheist intellectuals of our day, like Seth MacFarlane and Angelina Jolie.
What a just incredible bad faith cherry pick. What a douchebag.
But they were sort of clever in their own way, don't you think?
Like a modern, I don't know, like a B student in high school today is vastly more knowledgeable about the world than any of these people. Maybe except for like Neil Armstrong, because he was an actual modern person. Now, intelligence is different. Obviously, a pretty good number of people on this list were extremely intelligent. But look at what science allows for us to do, Matt. Even somebody who isn't really all that intelligent knows more about the world than the most intelligent people of the past. And not just knows more, knows exponentially more. If our primary epistemic tool was the Bible, we would be living like people did 2,000 years ago. No better.
Science, just like any other subject, is multidimensional. There is the fact, and then there is the meaning behind the fact, and then there is the motivation to pursue the fact and its meaning, and then there is the issue of how to apply and interpret all of these things. In other words, science does advance or regress drastically depending on the prevailing philosophy of any civilization. Christian civilizations advanced science immeasurably because they were Christian civilizations. If you take God out...
What? Because... just begging the question. They advanced science because they were Christian civilizations. Again, this is just saying what happened historically and then saying it couldn't have happened any other way. There's no reason that a society could have that could have developed that was secular and rejected religion would not have pursued science. In fact, as the world becomes less and less and less religious, it pursues science to, I would argue, a greater and greater extent every year.
Out of the study of the origin of life, not only are you left with a confused and arbitrary thing, riddled with holes and inconsistencies, but you've also stripped the subject and the study of the subject of its meaning and purpose.
What is that if you take God out of the study of the origin of life? There is no insertion of God for the study of the origin of life. It's just a thing that you can say to make your fifis all warm and fuzzy. If you want to say that science is not a value assigning process, then great. It's not. Neither is capitalism. Neither is speaking Spanish. Neither is doing math. These aren't critiques.
Our understanding of the universe deepened so profoundly during the Christian era because of the Christian tradition that brought a sense of order and rationality to the universe.
No, Christian zealotry was much more powerful, and people took it much more serious before the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution. The person who says, I don't need science or anything else in my life because I have the Bible, is the more deeply committed and faith-orientated Christian than the Christian who says, I love the Bible and it inspires me to do science.
Now, political and ideological forces wish to decapitate existence from the mind that created it, thus shredding its order and meaning, and leaving us with a science that has regressed back into something incoherent and archaic. Atheism does not advance science. It doesn't advance anything. It does only what it is designed to do: confuse and destroy.
What the fuck? What kind of statement is that? And he doesn't explain what that's even supposed to mean, except I suppose because he thinks if there is no God, there's ultimately no meaning and purpose, which isn't true. Matt is just sitting here being like, oh, I love being a slave to God. I love having the shackles of Christianity bestowed upon me. Saying if there's no God, then where will my meaning come from is really not different from saying if there's no master, then whose slave will I be?
You can't take Christianity out of the classroom no matter how hard you try. If you take it out, most everything, especially science, goes with it.
No, literally 100% of the science can just be the information and the data. Science is absolutely 100% from beginning to end, methodologically, philosophically, in every possible aspect, completely secular.
Christianity is woven into the fabric of most every academic subject except gender studies. You can, however, remove atheism, and I think it's time we do that. Such a silly superstition. Uncaused causes removed from the ultimate cause. Human consciousness that...
Yeah, the atheists, they don't even engage in special pleading like we do.
Develops accidentally out of lifeless material. Order coming from chaos. Rationality coming from irrationality. Everything coming from nothing has never done anyone any good, and it doesn't belong inside a school. Really, we must get atheism away from education before we all end up like the modern atheist's greatest prophet, Nietzsche, who died insane and naked, eating his own feces in a mental institution. This is not the sort of fate we should wish upon our children. Think of the children, for goodness sake.
The final comment I want to make is how deliciously ironic it is. I didn't really pick up on this. During this entire article, he says that the atheists hate science. Christians love science. If it weren't for Christianity, then there would be no science. By the way, I'm a Christian and I fucking hate evolution. Arguing Christians embrace the science while saying, I'm a Christian and I hate evolution and climate change. Well, Matt, I would stick to what you're good at, which is being an unlearned, bigoted asshole. Thanks for watching.